back to Check Your Leader TV. Today we're continuing with our General ARMEE 2 Bootcamp. If this is the first video in the series that you're looking at, go back one, check out the GdA2 Bootcamp Part 1. And once you've had a look at that, join us for this Part 2. In Part 2, we're going to be looking at movement, firing. Hopefully we'll get to charges. And also probably some hand-to-hand combat. We're using as the vehicle to explore these rule mechanisms. We're going to play a scenario out of Napoleonic Scenarios for General Brigade Volume 1, the Battle of Crayon, 1814. So without further ado, let's get into it. However, before we start our boot camp, it would be remiss of me not to thank Battlefield Accessories for being the sponsor of this series of videos. And they have a special offer for viewers of the channel. They're offering these fantastic double-sided deployment markers for viewers of the channel. I'll give you explain to you how you can obtain these for free as we progress through the boot camp. Suffice to say, these markers are used for the deployment process in General ARMEE version 2, and we have a multiple of nations. As you can see here, I've got Austrians, French, Russians, British. You can also get Prussians and Spanish. In addition to these awesome deployment markers, you can also get these game tokens. So you can see here you get game tokens for units that go unformed, units that are suffering fire discipline. They come in these frames. Oh, they just fell out. And you can see you've got markers there for brigades that are hesitant and faltering. They're just double-sided. You just flip them over and away you go. These are really, really nice game tokens. They're pretty cheap as well. And there is a flat rate postage for overseas buyers. But if you want the deployment markers, you can get a set free, and I'll explain how that happens as we progress through this boot camp. Now, before we start, there was a mistake in the last video when we were rolling to determine initiative. What we had done for the French was for playing at divisional level, and see reference here. You can see here, if you go to that page, you'll see the process is slightly different. Suffice to say, we shouldn't have been rolling 5 dice and picking the lower 2. We should have only been rolling 3 dice and picking the lower 2 for the allies. Essentially, basically, the way it works is you go off how many divisions you have, within each division, how many brigades are hesitant, and in this case, the Russian brigade with the 2 hesitant, the Russian division with the 2 hesitant brigades generates an additional single die. And so, just to keep it unbiased and even, we're going to roll for the allies now, and they'll be rolling 3 die, and they'll take the lower 2. And they've rolled a double 1 and a 6, so the status quo remains the same. The Prussians and allies do not have the initiative for the first turn of our game. The French do. Now, as we go forward with this boot camp, you will see occasionally a pop-up which will give a page number or a chapter number or a paragraph number that will relate to the particular part of the game that we're engaged in. So if you have your rules handy, it could be useful for you to follow along as we go along. Okay, so let's get into it. So starting with the French, the first thing that we do in the game is we, after we've done determining our initiative, what we go on with now is charge declarations. So the French have the initiative and they declare any charges that they have. Unsurprisingly, right at the start of the game, no charge declarations for the French. We then ask the allied player, do you have any charge declarations? Again, no charge declarations from the allies. So now we go into movement. Movement is divided into 2 phases or sub-phases. We have tactical movement and reserve movement. So the first thing we're going to do is tactical movement for the French, and then we will do tactical movement for the Allies. Okay, so there's two main chapters in the rulebook that we concern ourselves with at this stage is Chapter 9, Movement. So there it is. That's on page 52. And of course, Chapter 10, which covers terrain, which begins on Chapter 57. So from that, you can conclude that movement, there's not a lot in it. It only goes from page 52 and ends at page 56. So essentially, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages covers covers movement. The only things you really need to understand about movement is there are set rates for movement, and you will find them on the quick reference sheet. And also that if you are going to change formation and move, the only troops that can change formation and move in the one turn are veterans or above. And formation changes have to take place before movement. You can't move, then change formation. I guess the only real exception to this rule, because there's always an exception, isn't there, is horse artillery. Because horse artillery can either limber up and move, so that's the formation change, then move, or they can move and then unlimber. So they would move and then they would change formation from limbered to unlimbered in their move. Now, before we get too much into talking about movement, just bear in mind that I'm using 28mm miniatures. Now, GdA2, just like GdA1, essentially uses inches when they're talking about 28mm and centimeters when they're talking about 15mm. Now, obviously, 6mm, 2mm, 10mm, whatever. Just consult your book, your rule book, and you'll be told whether you're going to be using 2 inches. You're going to be using inches or centimeters. It's in the book. Have a read. But for this game, obviously, I'm going to be using 28mm miniatures, so I'm going to be using those movement rates that are in brackets and expressed as inches. Now we'll have a quick talk about the movement of brigadiers or brigade generals. Okay, these guys that command the individual brigades. Now, they're queer cattle because they can move in the command phase if they are going to be using the glory tasking. So if they want to attach to a battalion, cavalry regiment to provide glory, they would move in the command phase and attach to that unit. And then in the charge phase, when that unit moves off, well, obviously they go with the general, they go with that unit. Commanders in chief, generally speaking, you just place them down on the table and they don't move much. You will, however, use them if you're using a CNC tasking, and if you do that, then you just simply pick the general up and they have unlimited movement and then move to the brigade and where they're providing that CNC tasking. So that's generals, generally speaking. Now, obviously, terrain impacts movement. Again, if you go straight to chapter 10, you'll see exactly how that happens. Long story short, it usually results in a depreciation of the distance a unit can move. In some circumstances, however, troops can go at full speed through terrain, but as a consequence of that, they'll take a casualty. But if speed is of the essence, sometimes it's one of those decisions, those tactical decisions that you are confronted with, and you might decide that, you know what, it's worth taking the hit, it's worth taking the casualty so I can get my troops to where they need to be as fast as they possibly can get them there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start the battle. I'm going to do movement. I'll do tactical movement for the French, have a bit of chat, tactical movement for the Prussians and Russians, have a bit of a chat, and then the reserve movement. Okay, so I've completed movement in turn 1 for the French. Things to note, the skirmishers have gone forward here. These guys have come up and they're keeping 1 battalion behind to provide a rallying point for these 2 battalions in case something goes wrong. These skirmishers have moved through the woods. Skirmishers are not affected by terrain, so woods that would normally cause other units to do half movement skirmishers, they can just go through no problem at all. What you might have noticed here is these two recruit battalions have moved through behind these, through these two young guard battalions. In GdA, as long as you stay without outside 9 inches of the enemy and you don't end up within 9 inches of the enemy, you can just simply have passage of lines. So units can simply pass through one another as long as they've got the room to do it. And here quite clearly they have. Obviously this brigade was a bit of a shit fight. They deployed poorly. Might explain why they initially were hesitant. They've tried to compensate for that poor deployment by moving these recruit battalions through these young guard battalions. The only other movement was the French guard cavalry, and they've moved their full movement to the edge of the ridge, but not into the terrain that will cause them any disorder. So that's movement for the French, and now we'll have a look at movement for the Allies. So now we've done the Allied movement. These skirmishers have moved up in line with the village here, this built-up area. Now the thing that's worth noting here is the battalion, the veteran battalion that was outside the built-up area, has moved into it. When the garrison, as soon as a unit comes into contact with a built-up area, if they want to garrison it, they can automatically, they take the whole move to enter the BUA, and then they are unformed. So as soon as they come into contact with the BUA, they pop in, but they're classed as unformed. They can form up in the next turn as long as they don't move. So they've come in. These guys, it takes a full turn to exit a BUA, and basically they come out and they remain unformed for a full turn, and they basically just exit the BUA and remain in contact with one of the sides of the BUA. So there's that. Another thing that's worth noting is this brigade is hesitant. A hesitant brigade can't move towards the enemy, but that does not preclude its skirmish screen from doing so. So these Schützen from this brigade have moved forward, and over here also the skirmishers from this reservist Landwehr brigade has moved forward. Notice they have not moved towards the cavalry because skirmishers have to stay a minimum safe distance away from cavalry. Other than that, no movement for the Allies. These two brigades here are not hesitant. That said, they are in a defensive posture, and for this scenario, they need a redeployment order to move forward unless they have a line of sight to enemy cavalry. Okay, so that's the tactical movement. Now we would do what's called reserve movement. So any units that are off table that we want to bring on, if they were available, we would bring them on. But in turn 1 of this particular game, there are no off-table units to enter for either side. So let's skip forward now to firing. So now we're up to shooting, and in the shooting phase, again, it's broken down into sub-phases. We have a skirmish fire phase, an artillery fire phase, and a infantry volley fire phase. And the way it works is in the skirmish phase, the player with the initiative goes first, and then the passive player, or the player that doesn't have the initiative, I'm going to call them the passive player. The passive player then would fire their skirmishers, and that happens also for artillery fire and for infantry volley fire. And obviously, if I fire first and I inflict casualties, those casualties happen there and then. It's not a case of I shoot, you get casualties, but you don't count them because we're firing simultaneously. No, the side with the initiative gets the first licks in. That is why, one of the reasons why it's important to have the initiative. It's not always imperative. Sometimes you might decide, I'd rather see what the opponent is doing and react rather than have the initiative and then have to move first. So these are just, again, these tactical decisions that you are forced to make when playing General d'Armée version 2. So with that said, what we're going to do is we'll start with skirmish fire. The French have the initiative, so they'll be shooting first. Interesting point to note here. The French do have a skirmish tasking with this brigade skirmish line here, and so as a consequence of that, they're going to get some additional dice. Also, when the Allies fire, these guys here, these Schutzen are rifled armed. So even though they don't have a skirmish tasking, they will have a slight advantage. Well, they'll get extra dice because they are rifle armed. Right, so let's get into shooting. Now, skirmish fire in General ARMEE version 2 is pretty straightforward. Essentially, you fire by skirmish dice. So, essentially, let's work with this brigade skirmish line here first. The way it works is very simple. For every base in the brigade skirmish line, you get 1 dice. So there's going to be 4 dice. And then, because it is a brigade skirmish line, it gets an additional dice on top of that. So that's the basics. So this brigade skirmish line, who's going to shoot at this brigade skirmish line, will be rolling, in this case, 5 dice. And they will score hits on any roll of 4, 5, or 6. 2 hits equals 1 casualty. So 2 hits, 1 casualty. 3 hits, 1 casualty. 4 hits, 2 casualties. Any half hits are not counted. So let's fire with this brigade skirmish line here. Okay, so we have a 4, 5, a 6, and 2 1s. The 2 1s are misses. There's nothing there. 3 hits, no halves. That equates 1 casualty. And the way I reflect casualties in General ARMEE for my skirmish lines is I just put down a little red token. So 2 tokens. On the 3rd hit, the base comes off. Each base can take 3 hits. Well, a 3rd hit will remove it. Hey guys, very quickly, I misspoke. I said skirmish dice. What I should have said is casualty dice. So when you're rolling these dice for brigade skirmish lines, you're not rolling skirmish dice, you're rolling casualty dice. Okay, now that we've cleared that up, let's continue. Okay, let's just talk quickly about the firing range of brigade skirmish lines. What you do simply is you measure the range from each of the skirmish base, If over half of the bases are in range, all front rank bases can fire. Otherwise, only fire with those bases in range. The key point here being if over half. So not just half, but over half. So if I have 4 bases, if 2 bases are in range but 2 aren't, then I don't get to fire the whole skirmish line at that particular target. If I have 4 skirmish bases and 3 bases are, then I can fire all 4 bases at that particular target. There is a priority. Essentially, skirmishers must fire at anyone who's charging at them. That's their first priority. But if no one's charging at them, they can essentially choose who they want to shoot at. So in this particular case, that brigade skirmish line in the tree line there could shoot at either the Garrison, or they could shoot at the Prussian Schutzen on the high ground there. In the case of this particular brigade skirmish screen, we have 4 bases, so that gives us our 4 dice. It's a brigade skirmish screen, so it gets another 1. It has the skirmisher tasking, so it gets another 2. So now we're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dice. It doesn't want to shoot at the Schutzen. It's come forward because it wants to put some hurt on this Garrison here. Now, it's going to lose 2 dice by shooting at a Garrison, but the French do want to soften up these Garrisons before they go in, so that's the intent. So, with that in mind, we're down to 5 dice. We fire, and we've done pretty well. 1, 2, 3, 4 hits. That's 2 casualties. This brigade skirmish line has inflicted 2 casualties. However, because there's an enemy skirmish screen within range and arc, the first casualty must go on the brigade skirmish screen over here. So, 1 hit's going to fall on this brigade skirmish screen here, and 1 hit will go on the Garrison. So we'll put the hit on the Garrison first. I use these little casualty markers that I make. I get the dice frames from Battlefield Accessories. So the first hit goes in on those guys. Sorry, the second hit goes in on them over there. The first hit, of course, goes on this enemy skirmish screen that is within arc and within range. So the final brigade skirmish line that we have to deal with is this French skirmish line here. It consists of 4 bases, so 1 dice per base plus 1 for the brigade skirmish line. They're firing at skirmishers. There's no pluses or minuses from skirmishers firing at skirmishers, so it's just going to be straight 5 dice. 1 hit, and that means that their skirmish fire is ineffective against these Landwehr skirmishers. So no hits at all. Now it's the Allies' turn. So now we look at these Schützen. Now 1, 2, 3, 4 bases, 4 dice. It's a brigade skirmish screen, so it gets another one. It does have the skirmisher tasking in play for this brigade, so that's another one. That's actually another 2. The brigade skirmish tasking adds an additional 2 dice. As you'll see though, I have actually added the 2 dice. And because these guys are riflemen, that's another one. So that is a grand total of 8 dice. That is a lot of firepower coming from these Prussian Schützen at these poor unfortunate voltigeurs. So let's roll the dice and see what we get. Okay, we have 3 6s. So there's a double 6. So that's going to inflict a discipline test on these chaps. Another hit here. Okay, so that's 2 hits so far. The rest are 3s and 1 single 4. The single 4 is not going to be of any consequence whatsoever. So all this firepower results in 2 hits, but also, what's more important, a discipline test on these French voltigeurs. Now, as soon as a discipline test is caused, the discipline test is taken straight away at that point. So these guys will be testing as a brigade skirmish line, which is the same as basically line infantry, and so they'll need a 7 to pass. Now, a result of 6 is a fail on the brigade for the brigade skirmish line. They need 7 to pass, but 6 is not tragic. It just means that they've gone unformed. So I'll slap down my beautiful Battlefield Accessories command token, orders token, unformed, indicating these guys are unformed. And there are consequences, obviously, for being unformed. Okay, so the next thing we're going to go on with is Garrison fire, which is part of skirmish fire. Now, this Garrison here is part of the same Garrison that has a skirmish tasking. Now, all standard Garrisons get 5 dice, so they've got that going for them. They've also got 2 because of the skirmish tasking, so that takes them up to 7. Now, they have 2 targets. They have this skirmish screen here and this one over here. So what they're going to do is they're going to take their 7 dice. They're going to fire 4 at this skirmish screen and 1 at that one. So let's do the 4 shots first at these poor unfortunates. Okay, 6, 3, 2, 2. Okay, only 1 hit, so that's no effect at all. Okay, and then that leaves their other shots at this skirmish screen over here. So 3 dice this time. One hit. Sorry, 2 hits, 1 casualty. Now we move on to the Garrison right beside them. Now there's a slightly different situation. Again, they get 5 because they're a standard Garrison. They get 2 for the tasking, so that takes them up to 7 dice. However, they're unformed because they've only just moved in. So they lose 1, so they're down to 6. They also lose another dice because the target they're firing at is in cover. Okay, so 5 dice. Well, they've got a double 6, so that's going to cause a discipline test because they have the skirmish tasking. They've also rolled 4 hits, so that's going to cause 2 casualties. So that's going to remove a base and cause a discipline test. So we might as well do the discipline test now. So we'll remove the base. Okay, they've rolled above 7, they've passed. So they might have suffered casualties, but they don't care. Just a point in regards to discipline tests when you have multiple targets. If you, the firer, have engaged multiple targets and you cause a discipline test, the target that is closest to the firing unit is the unit that takes the discipline test. If the multiple targets are equidistant apart from the firer, then the firer determines which unit takes the discipline test. And now we come to this brigade skirmish line here, the Schutzen first. First of all, they've got 4 bases, so they get 1 for being a brigade skirmish line, and then 1 for each base. So that gives them 5. Now they're going to concentrate their fire on the brigade skirmish line in the woods. Now they do also lose 1 other dice because they're shooting at troops in cover. So they're down to 4 dice, and they've scored just 1 hit, which is no casualties. Finally, we have the Landwehr. Now they are a brigade skirmish line, so 1 dice, and there's 3 bases, so that takes them up. That gives them another 3, so a grand total of 4. 4 dice for the Landwehr shooting at the voltigeurs, and they've rolled a 4 and a 6 and a 3 and a 3. So they're going to inflict 1 casualty on that that skirmish line. Just here. That's all the skirmish fire done. So what we're going to go on with now is artillery fire. Now, when it comes to artillery fire, the main thing that you have to understand is that there are 3 types of fire. There's standard fire, inferior fire, and weak fire. And there's 3 types of ranges. There's canister range, there's effective range, and then there's long range. The way you move between standard fire, inferior fire, and weak fire is wholly dependent upon how many negative factors are playing upon the battery doing the firing. So with that in mind, what we're going to look at first is we're going to have this battery here fire. So we'll go from right to left. This is a 6-pounder battery classed as medium artillery. They're going to be firing at the Garrison. Now, firing at garrisons, it's not particularly effective because essentially, historically, firing into built-up areas really wasn't all that effective. But hey, there's always a chance that we might be able to set the garrison or part of the garrison on fire. And given the situation in this scenario, the battery, where it's been deployed according to the scenario parameters, well, it might as well bang away. If nothing else, we might get a bit lucky. Now, with that said, you'll notice that this battery is on elevated terrain. So all batteries that are on elevated terrain get an extra range. So the long range is basically longer. But anyway, enough of that. Let's just get into it and see how this works. So, looking at this battery, it's firing at effective range because it's less than 24 inches. But it's not close range because it's not under 12. So, it's going to fire at this part of the garrison. And firing at a garrison gives us simply 1 CD. So, with just 1 dice. Now, the problem with firing with a single dice is there's a lot more of a chance of them going low on ammo. So, if they roll a 1, they'll go low on ammo. 4, 5, or 6, they'll hit. If it's a 6, it'll cause a fire. Oh, and we're lucky. First shot, and they've set fire to a part of the garrison. Now we have to randomise where the fire is. So we have to figure out which part of the built-up area is on fire. Now, because this is a large village, it's actually 2 separate areas. So essentially, it's right through the middle. There's garrison or village area A on the right and village area B on the left. So we were firing at village area A on the right. Okay, so we'll decide whether it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll re-roll a 5 or a 6. 1, 2, 3. So it's 1, 2, 3. So the back end of the village is on fire. Now that will continue to burn for the entirety of the game, and you can't extinguish fires during the length of a game. Now what that means is when a BUA or a side of the BUA is on fire, no troops can move through that part of the BUA, and it cannot be, and you can't, they can't shoot out of that. Okay, so the next artillery unit to fire is the only other artillery unit on the field for the French. This battery here, again, these are 8-pounder guns, 6 8-pounders, same thing. So medium artillery, and they're going to fire at this large battery over here. So it's over 24 inches. So this is going to be long range fire. So that makes it an inferior battery shot. So it's just a straight 2-die roll, and that's 8. Inferior battery on an 8 causes 1 casualty. So now it's all the artillery is fired on the French side. It's now the artillery on the Allied side's turn to shoot. Now this battery is hesitant, which means it can only fire at effective range. It's not allowed to fire at long range, and at effective range it can only fire, when it's hesitant, it can only fire directly ahead. So the only legitimate target for this large battery within 24 inches, which is effective range for medium guns, is the skirmishers, because they're not quite at 24 inches. It's not quite 24 inches to these French infantry columns to their front. One thing I have noticed I've just missed to do is when we fired this French battery at this large battery, we also get bounced through to the target behind, any target within 3 inches, which is this Prussian infantry regiment there. Poorly deployed. They've deployed too close to a deployed battery at this point of the battle, and so they take a bounce through. So bounce through fire is conducted using a simple casualty dice, and just like all casualty dice, it's going to hit on a 4+. And it's rolled a 6. So that's a hit on the infantry battalion to the rear as well. So the fire from this battery rolled an 8, inferior battery fire, rolling an 8. 7 or 8 will give 1 casualty, so it's 1 hit on them. And then the casualty dice for the bounce through, 1 hit on the Prussian line as well. Now the only target this this large battery can fire at is the French voltigeurs at the front. Now, because they're firing at skirmishes, it's automatically inferior fire. But they are a large battery, so they will get 1 casualty dice. Now, you could roll 2 dice for the fire of the battery and then roll a separate casualty dice. Or you can fire 2 dice for the battery and then use a different coloured dice for the casualty dice for because the battery gets a casualty dice. The reason this is important is because if either of these dice roll double, if we roll a double 1, the battery could go low on ammo. That said, the battery can never go low on ammo for its first shot. So this is its first shot. So regardless, we need to know what the score is, because standard fire and inferior fire is basically, as you'll see on your quick reference sheet, it's a total, whereas the casualty dice 4, 5, or 6. Okay, so here we go. So this battery fire will fire at the skirmishers. Well, 9 on the 2 dice, and a 2 on the casualty dice. So the casualty dice is missed, but a 9 is going to be, inferior is going to be 1 casualty, and it would be, if it was at canister range, it would also cause a discipline test if it was an elite battery firing. But in this case, it's not. So it's simply one casualty on the skirmishers. So because they are skirmishers, we simply mark them with the little marker. Now, that's 2 hits total on that Voltigeur skirmisher line there now. If they get one more hit, they'll lose a base. Now, obviously, as you see, I like using smoke when I have my batteries firing. The reason I do this is it just reminds me that they're fired, and if I have batteries that go that lose fire discipline, or sorry, if I have infantry that lose fire discipline, instead of marking that with the smoke, I use one of those battlefield accessory tokens, and I place that down. I just like the look of the smoke on the battlefield. So that's the end of the firing for both sides now, because there are no infantry at volley range, so no volleys can be exchanged. At this point, we would then go on to the melee phase, or close combat phase. But because there isn't a close combat phase, that basically ends turn 1. All units that are marked with hesitant markers, we would remove. They would come off the table, and I remove all the smoke that I've placed down to remind me that units are fired. So all those smoke markers come off. And so that ends turn 1. Let's now go on to turn 2. My word, but war is hell. Now is as good a time as any probably to grab yourself an icy cold beverage. My beverage of choice, of course, is Pepsi Max. But also to discuss what the offer is from Battlefield Accessories for viewers of this channel. Good news is, if you decide that you want to purchase a set of their oh-so-flash GdA2 game markers, you can also get for free a set of these oh-so-awesome GdA2 deployment markers. Simply add into your cart the game markers that you are going to purchase, and then add in one of these, either French, Russian, Prussian, Austrian, Spanish, or British, into your cart, and you will get them for free. Just enter the promo code CYL, obviously for check your leader. Do not write in check your leader, just the letters Charlie, Yankee, Lima. Don't write Charlie, Yankee, Lima, just the letters C, the letter Y, and the letter L. And you will get, for completely free of charge, a set of these awesome deployment markers. That is Battlefield Accessories' way of thanking you for their patronage. So we say thank you to Battlefield Accessories for sponsoring these videos. I get absolutely nothing out of it other than the fact that I get the warm glow of knowing that I've spread some General d'Armée joy around the world, and at the same time put into your pocket, completely free of charge, some oh-so-flash deployment markers. So, thanks again to Battlefield Accessories, and let's get back into it. Like I said, war is hell. So the first thing we do to start the game, start the turn, is we roll for ADC availability. The French have 4 brigades on table, so that's 4 ADCs, plus the divisional commander is incomparable, so he gets an extra 1. So that gives us a grand total of 5 ADCs maximum. Well, 5 ADCs that we're rolling for. And we have got 4. Now you'll have noticed that the one that the French did not get was a 1. Enter the divisional adjutant. We can re-roll any single die rolls of 1. So if we can get a 3+ on this, we'll have another ADC. At 2, unfortunately, no joy. So they've still only got their 4 aide-de-camps. Now we roll for the Allies. They have a grand total of 6 aide-de-camps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, correction, 7 aide-de-camps. So we roll for theirs and see how many they have available. Okay, that's a pretty poor roll. They have 4 available. Now we can also roll for the Corps Commander's orders. Now, it doesn't matter really the order in which this is done, yeah. The Corps Commander's orders, red, white, black and blue. The Allies first, and they have available all four, so they can choose any colour, any of the orders from the Corps Commander's suite of orders they want. They're all available. Now let's do the same for the French. And the French have all their core orders to choose from available as well. Right. So what will the French Corps Commander go with? So the French are going to go with using the black die, okay, which is the reinforce core order. And they're going to go with releasing a brigade from the reserve division to assist and reinforce a division on the table. Now, the purpose of that is quite simply, there is a brigade that is not available scenario-wise until turn 5, but we want it earlier. So the Corps Commander has intervened, in this case Napoleon himself, and has now decided to hustle up that brigade straight away. What we do is we roll to see if that brigade turns up next turn, or 2 turns later, or 3 turns later, which means it will just arrive at turn 5. So it will achieve nothing. So let's roll to see how sooner this brigade will arrive. 5. So what's going to happen is this brigade here is going to arrive at turn 4 as opposed to turn 5. In addition, the scenario says that it has to arrive on the spur, so that high ground to its right. But because I've used the reinforce tasking, it can arrive at any point on the rear edge as the Corps Commander directs. So it has the advantage of not only bringing the reserves on potentially earlier, it also allows it to come on exactly where the Corps Commander wants. So they were scheduled to arrive at turn 5, but because of the Corps Commander's intervention, these guys now are going to arrive at turn 4. As for the Allies, they're going to use ride the line. Essentially, Blücher has decided that if one of his brigades goes hesitant, he will ride the line and remove that hesitation from that brigade commander. Now, obviously, if none of the brigades are hesitant, then that has been wasted. But the Allies are betting that they probably will have one brigade, at least one brigade hesitant, and if Blücher can enter the fray and give them a bit of a kick in the butt, then that's what he will do. So now the French allocate their ADCs. They're going to give 2 ADCs to this brigade because they want to do an artillery assault. They'll also add a 3rd ADC so that they can have a reroll, so a brigade attachment. They're giving no ADCs to this brigade over here. This brigade, they will give 1 ADC for the skirmisher tasking. Being a bold brigade commander, he has an organic reroll because he's only using a single ADC tasking. And as for the French cavalry, that's a bold brigade commander, so they're just going to hope that he can get a reroll if things go wrong. Now, what are the Russians and the Prussians going to do with their ADCs? Well, the Prussians are going to continue with the skirmish tasking here with this bold brigade commander. They're going to go with 2 ADCs here for an artillery assault plus 1 a brigade attachment. And then basically they're going to leave the rest of the brigades to fend for themselves. Okay, so let's roll. 5, they're fine. These chaps here with the skirmish tasking and a bold brigadier. Fine, no problems whatsoever. Moving along, the artillery assault with the attachment. So they've got a re-roll. They're fine. And finally, this brigade commander here He's winging it. He's got no safety net. He's fine. Okay, so far so good for the French. All their brigade commanders are good to go. There are no hesitant brigades. Let's do the Russians now. So we'll start with the Russians first. This brigade here, no re-rolls. They're fine, no problems whatsoever for this brigade. This infantry brigade here, fine, they're not hesitant. The Russian cavalry, 6, they're fine. The Austrian cavalry, oh, they've gone hesitant. So there's your one hesitant brigade. Now the Prussian, this small brigade here, they're fine. This brigade, they have a re-roll and they've also got artillery assault happening. They're fine. So far so good. Finally this brigade here with the bold brigade commander and the skirmish tasking. Fine. Good. So the Russians only have the Allies only have one hesitant brigade, but because Blücher is riding the line, he can lift the hesitant from them. So that brigade is not hesitant. However, because Blücher has ridden the line, in the next corps command phase, that dice won't be available because the corps commander is out riding the line. So both sides have no hesitant brigades to speak of, so it's simply a 2 dice roll on each side. We'll first roll for the Allies and see what they score. Okay, they've got a 6. Let's roll for the French. All the French have to do is tie to have the initiative. But when they roll a 3, they lose it. So now the Russians have pulled the initiative away. So the Russians will have the initiative for turn 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play out this turn until I hit a point that I think is worth sharing in regards to teaching you or diving deeper into a particular mechanism. We're now up to the charge phase. The Russians declare what charges they have. They've got none. The French declare if they've got any charges, they've got none. So now we move directly into the movement phase. So we're going to start with on table or tactical movement for the Prussians, followed by the French, then reserve movement for the Prussians and Russians, followed by the French. You'll have to excuse me, sometimes I'll call the Allies Russians, sometimes I'll call them Prussians, but either way, interchangeable, you know who I'm talking about. So without further ado, I'm going to crack on, do some movement now, and I'll see you when we get to something interesting to share. Okay, so I've concluded the movement phase for both sides, the tactical movement. Tactically, obviously the Prussians moved first. What they did is the unit that had come out of the BUA had reformed. The unit that has come into the BUA has reformed. So they are now both formed. The Prussians here, the battalion that was directly to the rear of the battery has stepped back so that they're over 3 inches away, so they won't be suffering any more bounce through fire. And the Russian brigade skirmish line from this brigade here, because it's a brigade skirmish line, it's not bound by staying within its own sectors. As long as it remains within 18 inches of the nearest formed unit, it can move freely, and it has done so. This battery here, prolonged to the right slightly, 1.5 inches, so it could get a better field of fire. And that was it for the Allies. Now, what's this? You say all this French cavalry is suddenly up on this high ground. Well, in this scenario, Créon 1814, this ridge line around here is all rough going. Cavalry can't move through rough going. Historically, what happened is the cavalry was led up onto the ridge by locals who knew some paths. It's totally randomized. They could have ended up here, or at that tree, or that tree, or near this, between these two areas here. And I rolled a 6, and they've come up through there. So essentially, the entire Guard Cavalry Brigade is now coming up through this pass led by a local. Now, that causes problems for these fellas because any skirmishers within 6 inches of formed cavalry have to automatically move away and take a casualty dice worth of casualties. So we'll get to that now. The only other French movement of note, this brigade here has advanced forward, and also the skirmish line has come up so that it can now start engaging the battery with skirmish fire. The French here have advanced all along the line. So that's movement. A withdrawal move for infantry is 18 inches or behind formed troops. So it just so happens 18 inches will get them behind their parent brigade. So they'll move back, but in doing so they also have to take a casualty dice worth of... so basically I roll a casualty dice, a 4, 5 or 6, and they take a hit. So they will. So they'll suffer 1 casualty. Obviously, the outriders from this brigade of cavalry have caught some of them and hacked them down, and some of them have just simply decided this is a good excuse to go find something else to do. So they're now back here. They're unformed. They've taken a casualty. It's not a bonus move. It's not normally when skirmishers give ground to advancing troops. It's just a bonus. They just maintain their distance. But in the case of cavalry coming up and threatening them, that basically drives them all the way back. That's all their movement for this turn done. And as you can see, they've suffered a casualty for their troubles. So this truly was a surprise for the Allies. Now into the reserve movement phase. The Russians, the Prussians, the Allies had no reserve movement. The French, however, did. Turn 2, a small brigade of French dragoons arrives. It's by the letter of the law of the rules, it's an illegal brigade because it's only made up of a single regiment of French dragoons. But we're talking about a scenario here, so don't worry about that. So it's just a small brigade consisting of a single standard size regiment of line dragoons on campaign horses, and they've arrived here on the spur. So that's all the reserve movement. They simply come on to the table, and that's all they've done at this stage. Because the scenario dictates that they automatically arrive, there was no need for dice, no need for dicing for them or anything like that. They simply come on. But that's a scenario thing, not a rules thing. Rules covering bringing on reserve brigades. That's a different thing, and we'll get to that at some point. But for this particular game, for this scenario, these chaps just simply trot on. So that's all the movement done, and so now we go on to the firing phase. The Prussians and Russians, they have the initiative, so they will do their skirmish fire, followed by the French skirmish fire, followed by the Allied artillery fire, followed by the French artillery fire, and then any volleys if anyone's within range, and it would appear that they're not. So let's, I'll just move through that, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so we've concluded the all the firing phase. Skirmish firing first. These Jaegers open fire on these guys. That's caused 1 casualty, as did the Garrison, which ultimately resulted in the removal of a base. These guys did not reform in the movement phase. They fired, but they obviously lost the dice as a consequence of that when they were shooting. Over here, the Garrison fired out at these guys, did no damage at all, but this skirmish line fired, and that resulted in some casualties over here. In the back and forward here, they've inflicted a hit over on these guys and a hit on these guys. Then we had the battery firing. The skirmish fire from here caused an additional casualty on these guys. When the battery then fired, its fire was enough. They got 1 hit, which was enough to remove a base from that skirmish screen. Then we went with the artillery fire from this battery here. They rolled an 11, which caused 2 hits on the battery and a discipline test, which they passed. Then we had the artillery assault. So this is worth looking at, artillery assault. So essentially, they're firing at a garrison, so it's going to be just 1 dice. Okay, but they do get 2 because they're on artillery assault. What's important is they don't roll a 1 on this dice. They'll hit on 4s, 5s and 6s, and a 6 will cause a fire if it's rolled on the red dice. Okay, so one casualty. So they're firing at this this part of the garrison, so they've caused 1 casualty on this battalion here. I'm pretty sure also, and I'll check this, but when the battery fired last time and got a 6, that's a casualty as well as starting the fire. So it's it has a double effect. So they should be at 2 casualties at this point. So that ends all the firing because there are no units at volley range for the infantry. We then, like I said, we would now go on to the close combat phase, but there's no close combat happening. So that ends turn 2. As you can see, the game moves along pretty quickly. If you've got 2 players, both players are engaged the whole time. It's one of the things I love about this game. It's really, really good. Okay, so that ends turn 2. And I think we're going to wrap it up there because we're coming in on an hour. So that ends Boot Camp Part 2. Boot Camp Part 3, well, it's shaping up to be pretty interesting because it's at this point I think we can start to see that there could well be some cavalry charges going in on the French left and some infantry assaults going in on the BUA on the French right. So it's all going to go off in Part 3, but we're going to wrap it up there, I think, for now. And so ends Part 2 of our GdA version 2 boot camp. If you've got any questions about anything that requires clarification, pop it in the comment section below. If I've made a mistake and you've picked me up on it, again, just let me know and I will fix it up on the next one and point out where I went wrong and how to fix it. Bear in mind, I am going to make, I am probably going to make mistakes. Careful reading of the rules is cannot be downplayed. It really is incumbent on the player to make sure that they understand the rules well when they're playing it. What I'm trying to do here is basically present the rules, some of the things that might pose confusion or might appear daunting. That said, I'm not perfect. I'm close, but I'm not perfect and I will make mistakes. I do, wherever I find there is some doubt, I often will fire a message to Dave Brown, the author of the rules, and ask him if he can clarify anything for me. It's very rare because the rules are so well written, but when I do pose those questions, Dave's very, very quick to reply to any questions that I might have. That said, he's not at my beck and call, and nor should he be, and so sometimes I will upload the video before I get an answer to any of the questions I have. Where I have any doubts, I will basically try to use my own experience and come to a conclusion that I think is logical and historically accurate. Other than that, I've got nothing else to add except to say to you that if you want a set of those fantastic GdA2 deployment markers, use the promo code CYL when you purchase a set of GdA2 game markers from Battlefield Accessories, and pop in to your cart a set of deployment markers of your choice and you will get them free. So thanks again to Battlefield Accessories. Thanks to you for joining us on this GdA2 Bootcamp, and please like, share and subscribe and provide feedback. I always find it interesting to hear what people have to say, even when it's critical. So I will catch you on the next one. Yubiquay.